3 p.m. call local time. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the news. And we start off with a political segment where spokesman for the Foreign Ministry, Councillor Ahmed Abu Zaid, said that Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri held the phone call with his American counterpart John Kerry. Shukri expressed Egypt's appreciation to the U.S. role in supporting the economic reform plan, which was presented to the International Monetary Fund recently. The two sides also tackled the recent development in Syria, Libya and Yemen. The U.S. Secretary of State informed Shukri on the outcome of his visit to Amman and his negotiations with different parties in Yemen. Egyptian authorities ordered the opening of Rafah border crossing on Thursday for the 4th consecutive day. They announced the crossing would be open till Friday in both directions for humanitarian cases. African leaders met in Morocco on the sidelines of the UN climate talks to agree a joint stance to fight global warming on the continent. Attending the meeting, Minister of Environment Dr. Khalid Fahmy said that Egypt supports the African aspiration to achieve the balance between mitigating the effect of climate change and coping with its effects. Morocco's King Mohammed told the summit attended by 20 African leaders that Africa is paying a heavy price over the climate issue and is without doubt the continent worst affected. He noted that these disruptions greatly hamper Africa's development and gravely threaten the basic rights of tens of millions of Africans. The king said the continent needed to speak in a single voice, demand climate justice. France's President François Hollande and UN Chief Ban Ki-moon also attended the summit, which took place alongside the COP22 climate change conference that took place in Marrakesh. Ban said Africa was at the front line of the fight against climate change and that 36 of the 50 countries most affected by global warming were African. Senegal's President Macky Sall said African countries would wait until 2020 for promised aid from developed countries to fight global warming. An agreement after last year's climate talks in Paris provides for a green fund of $100 billion per year from 2020 to help poorer nations make the shift to clean energy. The Daesh terrorist group killed more than 300 Iraqi former police 3 weeks ago and buried them in a mass grave near the town of Hammam al-Alila south of Mosul. Reporter visited the site of the mass grave where residents said that ultra-hardline militants buried victims who had been shot or beheaded. The residents said they believed up to 200 people were killed in the weeks before Daesh withdrew from the town. Human Rights Watch said some of the former policemen were separated from a group of about 2,000 people from nearby villages and towns who were forced to march alongside the militants last month as they retreated north to Mosul and the town of Tel Afar. Iraq Special Forces say they temporarily pausing in their push into the northern city of Mosul, held by Daesh terrorist group due to poor weather. Military officials said that the troops are securing areas that have taken with checkpoints and sweeping for explosives. Iraqi forces launched the long-awaited operation to retake Mosul nearly a month ago, but have only advanced into a few eastern districts. More details in the following report.
Due to poor weather and cloudy skies, Iraq Special Forces on Thursday paused temporarily in their push into the northern city of Mosul, held by the militant group, but still faced deadly attacks, including suicide car bomb. In the city's eastern Tahrir neighborhood, a car packed with explosives sped out from its hiding spot in a school complex, ramming into Iraqi troops' position and exploding into a ball of fire. Sources said that a soldier was killed and 3 were wounded. Military sources said that clouds over the city obscured the visibility of drones and strike aircraft, adding that troops are using the post to secure areas they have taken with checkpoints and are sweeping for explosives. Wednesday, heavy fighting broke out in Tahrir, where Daesh suicide car bomber disabled an Abrams tank belonging to the Iraqi army. Iraqi forces launched their long-awaited operation to retake Mosul nearly a month ago, but have only advanced into a few eastern districts. Their troops have faced fierce resistance with snipers, mortar fire and suicide bombers driving armor-plated vehicles packed with explosives. After swift initial advances into the city's outskirts, the offensive slowed into more densely populated areas where Iraqi troops cannot rely as much on airstrikes and shelling because of the risk posed to civilians who have been told to stay in their homes. Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, the last major Daesh holdout in the country, driving the militants out of Mosul would deal a severe blow to their self-styled caliphate stretching into Syria.
Human Rights Watch accused Yemeni rebels on Thursday of detaining, torturing and forcibly disappearing opponents since they overran the capital in September 2014. The group said it had documented 2 deaths in custody and 11 cases of alleged torture, one of a child. It said they were among hundreds of reported cases of arbitrary detention by the Shia Houthi rebels and their allies. The rebels were battling government forces who were backed by a Saudi-led coalition which intervened in March 2015 when President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi fled into exile. The United Nations says more than 7,000 people have been killed and nearly 37,000 others wounded since the coalition intervention started. Millions more are in desperate need of aid. The Russian military says one of its airstrikes in Syria this week killed at least 30 members of Syria's Al-Qaeda-linked group, including some of its leaders. A defense ministry spokesman says the strike took place in Syria's northern province of Idlib on Tuesday. The strike was part of a long-anticipated offensive against rebel-held areas announced by Russia. More details in the following story.
A Russian airstrike in northern Syria this week killed at least 30 members of an Al-Qaeda-linked group, including some of its leaders. The Russian military said the announcement in a statement that comes amid a new wave of airstrikes in the war-torn country, with the besieged rebel-held part of the city of Aleppo facing its 3rd consecutive day of heavy bombardment by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces. The Russians, who announced the new offensive in Syria this week, have denied bombing the rebel enclave. At least 59 people were killed across northern Syria in the first 2 days of the offensive, including besieged neighborhoods of Aleppo as well as the surrounding countryside and the nearby rebel-held province of Idlib. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman said the strike targeting Al-Qaeda took place in Idlib on Tuesday. He said the strike was launched from Russia's aircraft carrier, which has been deployed to the Mediterranean, and hit the Al-Qaeda-linked militant group now known as Fatah al-Islam Front. Russia has said its air raids and missile strikes have only been targeting Idlib province and the central province of Homs to root out militants of the Daesh group terrorist and the Al-Qaeda-linked group. Meanwhile, Syrian warplanes have been pounding rebel-held districts of Aleppo, home to nearly 275,000 people. The Russia-declared offensive came hours after President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President-elect Donald Trump discussed Syria in a phone call and agreed on the need to combine efforts in the fight against what the Kremlin called their #1 enemy.
Iran must stop repeatedly overstepping a limit on its stock of a sensitive material set by its landmark deal with major powers. The United Nations nuclear watchdog reported on Thursday. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is policing the deal, said in a report last week that Iran had slightly exceeded the 130-ton soft limit on its stock of heavy water for a second time since the deal was put in place in January. Officials from the 6 other countries that signed the deal, including the United States, have expressed frustration over the breach and said the limit should be seen as firm. Iran's overstepping of the 130-ton also raises questions about how U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who has strongly criticized the deal, would handle any similar case once he takes office. The agreement places restrictions on Iran's atomic activities, monitored by the IAEA in exchange for lifting of international sanctions against the country. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi said on Wednesday he would not take any part in attempts to form a temporary or a technocratic government if he loses a December 4th referendum on constitutional reform. Renzi has promised to resign if he loses the vote. Many observers expect a temporary government to be formed charged with drafting a new electoral system or a so-called technical government of experts without party affiliation. However, Renzi said he would not take part in these options. Renzi also said he was sure the electoral system would be changed whatever the outcome of the referendum. The current system was pushed through Parliament by Renzi himself in 2015 and has never been put into practice. Turkey detained the mayor of the southeastern city of Van on Thursday, replacing him and two other mayors in the region, pressing on with a crackdown on pro-Kurdish politicians. Sources said that the government appointed administrators to run the municipalities in Van and the provinces of Sirte and Mardin in the mainly Kurdish southeast. State-run agency said police detained Van mayor Bekir Kaya at the council offices in the city on the shores of Lake Van, the heart of a province with a population of 1.1 million. Police searched municipality offices and house of Kaya and four other council officials. Kaya was sentenced to 15 years in jail in January on a charge of terror group membership. Turkey is fighting an insurgency by Kurdistan Workers' Party (PKK) militants, but its arrest of many pro-Kurdish politicians and journalists and the crackdown has triggered concern among its Western allies about the human rights situation in the region. The crackdown on pro-Kurdish politicians has run parallel with a purge of people accused of ties to the US-based cleric Fathallah Gulen, who is accused of orchestrating a failed military attempt. US President Barack Obama pays a farewell visit Thursday to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, widely seen as the new standard-bearer of liberal democracy since the election of Donald Trump. White House officials said that on the last leg of his final European tour as president, Obama will underline shared values, try to ease fears about the future of the transatlantic partnership, and thank Merkel for her friendship during his 2 terms. As Western leaders brace for potentially radical changes with Trump moving into the Oval Office in January, Obama wrapped up a visit to Athens on Wednesday, warning that globalization required a course correction to keep voters from drifting to extremes. After Trump's victory, Merkel expressed a desire to maintain close ties with Washington. Analysts said that the meeting Thursday could be seen as a kind of passing of the torch from Obama to Merkel, whom he has called his closest international partner for stewardship of the free world. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said on Thursday that he wants to build a relation of trust when he meets U.S. President-elect Donald Trump this week. He stressed that the two-way alliance is the core of Tokyo's diplomacy and security. Abe, set to meet Trump last on Thursday in New York, is expected to be the first foreign leader to do so since the U.S. billionaire real estate manager was elected on November 8th. Abe told reporters before leaving Tokyo that U.S.-Japan alliance is the cornerstone of Japan's diplomacy and security. Trump advisors said he expected Trump would reaffirm the American commitment to being in the Pacific long term. The advisors said Japan's financial support for U.S. troops in Japan might come up, but was unlikely to be a focus. South Korea's parliament on Thursday approved a bill to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate a corruption scandal engulfing President Park Geun-hye, sharply raising political pressure on her to step down. The motion proposed by the main opposition Democratic Party passed by a vote of 196 in a 300-seat assembly, indicating some members of Park's ruling party backed the bill. The government has been rocked by allegations that a friend used her ties to park to meddle in state affairs and improper influence, triggering calls for the president to be impeached or step down. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Rizq warned Thursday violence would not be tolerated at a major anti-government demonstration planned for the weekend. Leading NGO and civil society alliance Bearish called the rally in the capital to demand the scandal-tainted Prime Minister's resignation. Bearish has urged its supporters to converge on Kuala Lumpur in its signature yellow T-shirts on Saturday. But the red shirts, a right-wing group aligned to Najib and his ruling United Malays National Organization, has vowed to confront protesters. Police have warned that tear gas and water cannons should be used, and Firebrand Red Shirts leader Jamal Yunus has warned that anything can happen, including violence. Ecuador said on Wednesday that the founder should receive guarantees that he will not be extradited if he faces justice in Sweden after 4 years of living in the South African nation's embassy in London, who enraged Washington by publishing a flood of secret U.S. diplomatic cables, fled to the embassy for fear that Sweden could end up sending him onto the United States, where he could face prison for leaking U.S. secrets. Swedish chief prosecutors spent several hours at the embassy, where she paused questions through an Ecuadorian prosecutor before leaving without making comment. Assange, who has repeatedly denied the rape allegations, sought refuge in Ecuador's embassy in August 2012. He is wanted in Britain for breaching bail. Rain and strong winds battered central New Zealand on Thursday, threatening further damage just days after a powerful earthquake killed 2 people and devastated parts of the country's South Island with huge landslides. The details in the following report.
Foreign Minister Julian Long, in an interview, said that rain and strong winds battered central New Zealand on Thursday, threatening further damage just days after a powerful earthquake killed 2 people and devastated parts of the country's South Island with huge landslides. More than 1,000 tourists and residents have been evacuated from the small seaside town of Kekura by a fleet of helicopters and New Zealand naval vessels since the 7.8 magnitude struck early on Monday. Kekura fishing town and popular whale watching base ringed by steep mountains was completely cut off by landslides covering the coastal road and rail corridor. Further helicopter evacuations from the city on Thursday have been disrupted due to the bad weather. Warships from Australia, Canada and the United States in the country for the Royal New Zealand Navy's 75th anniversary had arrived the city to assist with the recovery. Most of the tourists evacuated to Christchurch, the South Island largest city about 150 kilometers south of the city, had continued their journeys, but around 130 people were being housed temporarily in Canterbury University's student halls.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, with this final note, we wrap up this political segment, and now we move on to the world of business and finance. And my colleague, Karim Ganaluddin. Very good afternoon, Karim.
Good afternoon, Rona. Good afternoon, dear viewers. Glad to have you with us. And we begin the business segment with home news as Minister of International Cooperation, Dr. Sahar Nasr, inaugurated on Thursday Egypt's Summit for Entrepreneurship in the Red Sea resort of Gourna, with the attendance of Red Sea Governor General Ahmed Abdullah and the Canadian Ambassador to Egypt. Addressing the gathering, Nasr stressed the importance of developing small and medium enterprises as a tool in achieving growth and development. She noted that the success of Egyptian economic reform program will not be achieved without taking into consideration the social dimension, improving living standard, and empowering women and youth. U.S. Treasury yields eased on Thursday as a week-long surge that followed Donald Trump's shock election win subsidized, further dragging the dollar off a 13.5-year peak set overnight and nudging Asian stocks a touch higher. Europe's main stock markets wobbled in opening deals on Thursday, with London's benchmark FTSE 100 index up 0.1% to 6.75 points. In the Eurozone, Frankfurt DAX 30 dipped 0.2% and 10,064 points, and the Paris CAC 40 shed almost 0.2% to 4.49 compared with Wednesday's finish. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan nudged up 0.1%. Japan's Nikkei dipped 0.1% after touching a 9-month high on Wednesday on the yen's sharp fall. In currencies, the dollar was flat at 109.06 yen after touching a 5-month high of 109.76 overnight. The dollar caught its breath on Thursday after charging to a 13.5-year high against a basket of currencies on bets the Trump administration will adopt inflationary policies, while the yen sagged after the Bank of Japan bond buying operation. The dollar index, which tracks the greenback against 6 major rival currencies, eased 0.1% to 100.32 after climbing as high as 100.57 on Wednesday, its loftiest peak since April 2003. A dollar rose to as high as 109.3 yen after the BOJ operation was announced, pulling up from an intraday low of 108.55. Later, the dollar was steady at 109.07. Crude oil prices eased as a bigger-than-expected U.S. crude inventory build outweighed hopes for a producer's freeze on output following Russia's comments about a possible meeting with Saudi Arabia. Brent crude was down 0.2% at $46.55 a barrel. Gold nudged up slightly as the dollar consolidated. Spot gold inched up 0.1% to $1.26 an ounce, moving further away from the 5-month low of $1,211.08 set on Monday. Gold has still lost roughly $100 an ounce from last Wednesday's post-U.S. election high on the back of the sharp rise in bond yields and appetite for risk. Demand for natural gas will grow in 2017, but at a slower rate than in recent years, Qatar's energy minister said on Thursday ahead of a meeting of exporting countries. Mohammed Saleh Al-Sadda said ministers of the gas exporting countries forum GECF would discuss long-term strategy at Thursday's meeting in Doha. He added the big news, of course, is that the demand for natural gas grew in 2015 by 1.9%, more than double of that in 2014, and it is expected to continue growing in the next year at a lower pace. The Doha-headquartered GECF is made up of 12 countries, including Russia, Algeria, Libya, and Venezuela, who between them account for more than 40% of global gas output. The GECF is meeting at a time when liquefied natural gas production is growing because of output from non-member Australia and the United States. France's unemployment rate increased slightly in the third quarter in discouraging news for President François Hollande as he weighs a re-election bid. Youth employment dragged down the figures, with job seekers aged between 15 and 24 accounting for most of the increase. Here's the story.
France's unemployment rate increased slightly in the third quarter in discouraging news for President François Hollande as he weighs a re-election bid. Joblessness was up to 0.1% to 9.7% in the mainland. For all of France, including its overseas territories, the third quarter figure stood at 10%. When Hollande took office in 2012, unemployment stood at 9.3% in mainland France and 9.7% overall. The measure reached a peak in the third quarter last year at just over 10%, then dropped to 9.6% in mid-2016, its lowest level since 2012. Hollande had been buoyed by September's showing the sharpest drop in unemployment for 20 years. The National Statistics Office said Thursday that unemployment was down 0.4 percentage points compared with the same period last year, adding that there were 2.8 million unemployed in mainland France, in the period from July to September. Hollande, who has the lowest popularity ratings of any post-war French president, has not yet confirmed whether he will stand for re-election next year. He is expected to announce his decision by mid-December. The unemployment figures are, however, to be taken with a degree caution because there is a margin of error of 0.0 percentage points. Labour Minister Mariam El-Khomeri said that over a year there had been a positive evolution in the jobless figures.
Britain's jobless rate dipped to 4.8% in the 3 months to the end of September as employers appeared to shrug off Brexit concerns. The Office for National Statistics said the July-September rate, a low for 11 years compared with 4.9% for the 3-month period that ended in August. Market expectations had been for no change. The nation's jobless total, meanwhile, stood at 1.6 million people over the same period. That was 146,000 fewer than a year earlier. The British economy expanded by 0.5% in the third quarter, recent data showed. That marked a slowdown compared with growth of 0.7% in the second quarter, but beat market expectations of 0.3%. Eurogroup chief has dismissed as intellectually impossible the notion that Britain could retain unfettered access to the European single market while also cutting down on EU immigration. He also warned that negotiations for Britain's departure from the EU would take a lot longer than 2 years, the estimated timetable written into the EU treaties. He spoke after an interview with Czech Daily in which the British foreign minister reportedly said Britain would probably have to leave the European Customs Union but still have free trade with EU states. Prime Minister addressed Parliament in defensive mode on Wednesday following a leaked report from a consultancy saying the government had no overall plan for Brexit. The banking conference said Brexit was a lose-lose situation for Britain and the EU. He also said that the British and EU economies would both be in a worse condition after Brexit. India announced new measures Thursday to allow farmers and marrying couples to withdraw more money from banks as frustration mounted over a cash crisis triggered by the withdrawal of all high-value notes. The shock move last week, which saw 85% of the cash in circulation suddenly withdrawn, has led to huge queues forming outside banks as people rush to exchange old notes for new and has thrown plans into disarray as the wedding season gets underway in the country of 1.2 billion people. The government has placed a weekly limit of 24,000 rupees on withdrawals as banks struggle to cope with the shortage of cash and many ATMs run dry. The sudden withdrawal of the two highest denomination notes has created huge problems for families planning weddings in India, where most people still use cash, even for large transactions. The Philippine economy grew at its fastest pace in more than 3 years in July-September, most of President Rodrigo Duterte's first 100 days in office, setting him up to meet the ambitious target he set for the year. The president, who was elected in May, inherited an economy that has enjoyed 70 quarters of uninterrupted growth, buoyed mainly by domestic demand, fueled by remittances from migrant workers. That momentum, further boosted by election campaign spending in the first 2 quarters of the year, resulted in 3 quarters forecast topping 7.1% growth. Such rapid expansion made the Philippines the fastest growing economy in Asia, by far outpacing even China. Vietnam will ratify a U.S.-led Pacific Trade Accord to the political changes ahead in the United States, but wants to maintain good relations with Washington as much as it does all other countries. Vietnam's legislature was almost certain to ratify the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership agreed last year, but had deferred it until after the U.S. presidential election won by Republican Donald Trump. The TPP, the signature economic policy of President Barack Obama's Asia-Pacific rebalance, looks increasingly uncertain with a Republican Congress and an incoming president who had called the agreement a disaster. The TPP would be a big boon for Vietnam's exports and manufacturing economy, which is receiving record foreign investment due to its numerous trade accords, cheap labor, and relative stability. Dear viewers, by this we wrap up the economic segment in this edition of Panorama News, and now it's time for the exciting world sports, and we begin with Brazil as it made 6 wins out of 6 as goals from Gabriel Jesus and Renato Augusto handed them a 2-0 win over Peru to edge them ever closer to World Cup qualification. Here Tuesday, Manchester City-bound teenager Gabriel fired Brazil into the lead with an assured 57th minute finish. The 19-year-old then set up Brazil's second for Augusto in the 78th minute with a superb pass to pick out the 28-year-old China-based midfielder. The victory leaves Brazil 4 points clear at the top of South America's World Cup qualification standings. The Brazilians now have 27 points from 12 games. With 6 games still remaining, Brazil are all but certain of securing one of the 4 automatic spots for the 2018 finals in Russia. In qualifiers for the 2014 tournament, a total of 25 points was good enough to clinch qualification from South America. Lionel Messi scored a majestic free kick as Argentina reignited their misfiring World Cup qualification campaign against Colombia before declaring a media boycott over claims of drug use by a teammate. Barcelona maestro Messi was at his best in a 3-0 win over the Colombians, which included his 10th minute 30-yard free kick before assists by Lucas Prado and Angel Di Maria. But the feel-good factor from a win which capitulated Argentina into the qualifying places in South America's campaign was short-lived. At an explosive post-match press conference, addressing reporters as he stood in front of the entire Argentina squad, Messi said players would no longer speak to the media following a claim made on Twitter by one journalist that forward Lavezzi had been caught smoking pot in the camp. Lavezzi, who plays for Chinese side Heavy Fortune, has denied the claim and vowed to take legal action. Gareth Southgate intends to review how England's players spend their free time if he secures the manager's job permanently after newspaper photographs showed Captain Wayne Rooney allegedly drunk. British tabloid The Sun published pictures of Manchester United skipper Rooney supposedly looking the worse for wear after gate-crashing a wedding last weekend. Southgate believes the claims merit investigation, but he is still waiting to hear from the Football Association about whether he has landed the role full-time following a 4-game caretaker stint. Rooney missed the game against Spain on Tuesday due to a knee problem sustained during last Friday's 3-0 win over Scotland in World Cup qualifying. He said he is said to have joined revelers celebrating a wedding at England's team hotel in Watford, north of London, on Saturday night, and The Sun quoted witnesses who said he was drunk. Thomas Muller admits having been surprised by accusations of arrogance and disrespect for saying Germany's 8-0 rout of Minna San Marino had nothing to do with professional sport. On Sunday, Alan Gasparoni, the San Marino National Olympic Committee's press officer, posted an open letter to Muller on Facebook listing 10 reasons Germany's trip to the Minnows for a 2018 World Cup qualifier was useful. Muller said he was taken aback by Gasparoni's angry rant, which poked fun at the clenched German habit of wearing white socks with sandals, and accused the Germans of thinking they could win by bullying San Marino. Having captained Germany's goalless draw with Italy in Milan, Muller said he had meant no disrespect. Last Friday's 8-0 drubbing in heavy rain kept Germany top of their 2018 World Cup qualifying group with a perfect record of 4 wins, while San Marino, ranked 199 places below the Germans by FIFA, remained bottom. From soccer to tennis, Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic are careering towards a Sunday showdown to decide their year-long battle for supremacy. The two 29-year-old rivals since their junior days have matched each other stride for stride so far at the ADP World Tour Finals, with Murray recording his second group win on Wednesday after a 3-hour battle with Kei Nishikori. Here's the story.
Andy Murray moved a step closer to the semi-finals of the ATP Tour Finals as the world number one wore down Kei Nishikori in a grueling 6-7, 6-4, 6-4 victory that took over 3 hours. Murray was pushed to his limits by Nishikori in the longest Tour Finals match played in the event's 7 years at London's O2 Arena. The 29-year-old finally subdued the Japanese star in 3 hours and 20 minutes, but he was made to vote for confirmation of a last four berth after Stan Wawrinka beat Marin Cilic in the evening match. Given the complex nature of the Tour Finals rule book, Murray now takes on US Open champions Wawrinka on Friday, with his fate still to be decided, while Nishikori also has a chance of reaching the semi-finals when he faces Chile. If he beats Nishikori on Friday, then both Murray and Wawrinka can go through. Murray's gritty recovery took his winning streak to 21 matches, just one short of his career best run of 22 successive victories earlier this year. It is the first time Murray has started the Tour Finals with 2 consecutive group stage wins since his tournament debut in Shanghai in 2008. Novak Djokovic's win over Miles Raonic on Tuesday had given the Serb a 70-point lead over Murray, the unofficial as it stands rankings, but with each victory at the Tour Finals worth 200 points. The Scot moved back above his old rival by beating Nishikori. To guarantee finishing 2016 in pole position, Murray must win the Tour Finals for the first time, with anything less giving Djokovic the chance to overhaul him.
Paul Gasol scored 24 points. LaMarcus Aldridge added 21, and San Antonio stayed perfect on the road with a victory over Sacramento. The Spurs led by as much as 107-89 in the second half and rolling to their 6th consecutive road victory. San Antonio didn't lead by fewer than 10 points until Sacramento made a 16-3 run over the game's final 3 minutes. Kawhi Leonard finished with 20 points, and Tony Parker scored 14 points and set with 7 assists for the Spurs. DeMarcus Cousins led the Kings with 17 rebounds and 6 assists. Belgian driver Thierry Neuville holds the edge over his rivals in the race for the runner-up spot behind new world champion Sébastien Ogier heading into this week's Rally Australia. Here's the story.
Belgian driver Thierry Neuville holds the edge over his rivals in the race for the runner-up spot behind new world champion Sébastien Ogier heading into this week's Rally Australia. French Ogier secured his 4th consecutive world championship title by winning the Rally of Catalonia in Spain last month, and the focus of the season's final round is on the fight for the 2nd. Neuville holds a handy points break over Mikkelsen in 2nd place in the championship, with Paden also in contention. Rally Australia, starting on Friday, is a 313 kilometers event incorporating 23 stages around Coffs Harbour in northern New South Wales state. For Mikkelsen and his teammates Ogier and Jari-Matti Latvala, the race will be an emotional end to Volkswagen's involvement in the sport it has dominated for the past 4 years, after announcing earlier this month it would no longer take part. Mikkelsen said, "It is sad, devastating to let go of something so positive, but for sure they will try too hard to finish in style after a good year and many good seasons." New Zealand's Paden put a lot of pressure on himself in Australia last year and said this time it was all about being as relaxed as possible in the lead-up.
Washington's Nicholas Backstrom had 2 goals and 3 assists as the Capitals swept back Pittsburgh 7-1 in one of the more one-sided games in the history of the 2 Metropolitan Division rivals. TJ Ossie had 2 goals and 2 assists, and Alex Ovechkin, Dmitry Orlov, and Justin Williams also scored for the Capitals, who moved level on points with the Penguins 4 points behind the Metropolitan leading New York Rangers. Capitals goaltender Braden Holtby stopped 25 for the 26 shots he faced allowing only a late goal to Phil Kessel. The Penguins lost Stanley Cup winning goalie Matt Murray late in the first period when teammate Evangelos Malkin accidentally hit him in the head. Murray allowed 2 goals on 14 shots before leaving, and Marc-Andre Fleury gave up 5 goals on 25 shots in relief. In the day's other game, Michael Frolik scored 49 seconds in overtime to lift Calgary past Arizona 2-1. Matthew Tkachuk scored in regulation for Calgary, which had lost in previous 3 home games, while Thomas Ryder netted for the Coyotes. Dear viewers, by this news item we wrap up the sports segment, and it's also the end of this edition on Panorama News. Dear viewers, for more news updates, visit our website at www.nileinternational.net. Thank you so much for watching. Signing off for the crew and myself, this is Karim Gamaluddin, and this is goodbye.